Joined now by Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show, Joy Reid, host of The Readout, Jen Psaki, host of Inside with Jen Psaki, and Alex Wagner, host of Alex Wagner Tonight. And Rachel, when he got to that turn in the speech, you could just sort of feel everything kind of go to a different level.
Yeah. You know, Chris, I had wondered heading into this speech whether he was going to try to give some sort of warning to the country. When we had advice, basically planning advice, that the speech might not be very long. And when we saw the White House today release what they called a letter, but was really about 100+ page long book explaining his view of his own accomplishments during this term, I had wondered, okay, well, they're not taking a lot of time in this speech. They have spelled out the list of accomplishments in writing ahead of the speech. So maybe this speech is going to be for something else. Maybe this is going to be a warning. I did not expect it to be this stark. As you said, he said, tonight there is an oligarchy taking shape in America. Dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people, a tech industrial complex that poses real dangers. He talked about a tide of misinformation and disinformation enabling the abuse of power. Not just saying misinformation and disinformation are bad on their own, but why are they there? They are there to enable the abuse of power. He talked about the free press crumbling, which put a shiver down my spine, and then talked about how truth is being sacrificed for lies for the purposes of power and profit. So this is important because he has essentially decided not to brag on the way out about what he did. He did a little of that, but really he's taken this last moment to say, here is what we've got right now, and this is why. This is not just dangerous because it doesn't sound American. It's dangerous because this is what they're doing to you with this oligarchy, with this concentration of power, and with what they're doing to the press and the truth. And that is stark and sober, and like I said, it put a chill down my spine. I think he's correct, and I'm glad he took this time to say it.
Joy.
Yeah, this struck me as two speeches. The first speech, you could say, is that's so Biden. Biden is a true nostalgia candidate in a way that Trump is as well, but they're nostalgic for different reasons. I mean, he genuinely believes, if you've been paying attention to Joe Biden over the last many, many, many years, he genuinely believes in the American project, full stop. He believes in all of the rose-colored glass ideas about America, and he will always lead with that. And he did that for the first half of the speech, talking about the Statue of Liberty, giving that moving story about the people who built it, and then sort of closing with that as well. But that second part of the speech, to Rachel's point, that was the speech. Because Joe Biden, while he is a nostalgia politician, he also in some ways is an aggressively progressive politician in a certain way, in that he really does believe in recentering what could be called America first. He believes that if you're going to have the AI industry, it needs to be in America. He really aggressively believes in repatriating some of this sort of internationalized commerce that has really hurt the working class and bringing it back. And he's actually proven it. He's done it. He stood by the unions. But that part where he then gives this warning that could have really, that we've been talking about on this air, right? This concentration of power in the hands of this tech industrial complex, the smothering of the lies being smothered for power and profit, saying the people must govern. Essentially saying that this thing that he loves so much, this America, is literally being essentially stolen by the oligarchs who've tried to do it before. And he talked about having to bust the trusts after the Gilded Age. And he did reference Eisenhower, because Eisenhower turned out to be right. We have been consumed by a military-industrial complex that feeds on war and feeds on the pain of war and on the cost of war and makes the Pentagon unassailable, its budget. But now you do see this concentration of power by tech oligarchs who have seized control of our politics and are about to have an office in the Eisenhower building in our Capitol, that are about to essentially co-run this country with the incoming president. Biden's not a radical, but it's going to strike, I think, a lot of people on the right as that being a radical thing for a president to say. But it needed to be said, and it needed to be said from the Oval. And I'm glad that he did.
I want to come to you, Alex and Jen. I want to play that clip again just to reset it. When he talked about the oligarchy, it was just a striking moment, just using that word and saying it so plainly. He talks about today an oligarchy is taking shape. Take a listen.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to.
Alex.
When he said that, you and I were both on set looking at each other like Joe Biden just said oligarchy in his closing address to Americans. It's very clear that he was thinking about, I think, an image that we've all sort of projected in advance, which is the fact that Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Sam Altman are going to be on the dais at the inauguration for Donald Trump. Joe Biden has been very vocal about the fact that Meta is ending fact-checking. He brought it up again in this series of remarks. These pictures are already haunting him in the closing days of his presidency. But it's not just that concentration of power that he clearly thinks of as a direct threat to democracy. He also called out the Supreme Court, right? To go out. This is Joe Biden, who wouldn't say a bad word about the court.
Yep.
And by the way, can I just say, props to him for mentioning the free press, because he has had a complicated relationship in terms of access, giving the press access to this particular presidency. But he is an institutionalist to the core. For him to call out the Supreme Court in the way that he did, call for term limits, call for an enforceable code of ethics, and call out their decision on presidential immunity is someone who, I'm with Joy on this. He believes in the American project, but it is clear that that vision he has, that belief he has, is very much frayed at the edges as he says goodbye to the presidency.
Jen, if you had to do the sort of 140-character version of Madison's insight in constitutional governance, it's that concentration of power leads to abuse of power, and that is precisely the warning that we were getting from someone that you worked for and saw up close over part of what is one of the longest careers in American politics.
That's exactly right. And someone, as Alex just said, is an institutionalist who believes in the peaceful transfer of power, who believes of the power of the presidency, even when it's held by different parties. And what I was really struck by, everything you all said, of course, was also the tone. He's not, if you look back at Joe Biden's speeches, and I was there for many of them, I was in many preps for many of them, typically he does a more traditional announcement of the policy. This is what we're doing. He doesn't speak as frequently, as directly to the American public as he just did in that speech. And I wrote down, he started from the beginning, and the order of events is also a choice here in any speech, especially one that's this short, because a more traditional Joe Biden speech would have started with a listicle of accomplishments, which is, I think, what I expected, right? And instead, he started out with what was almost kind of this lengthy analogy about the Statue of Liberty and standing up to a storm. The storm we can all assume is Donald Trump and the Trump administration. And he said in the early part, it's about who we are and who we stand for. And the rest of the speech seemed to be setting up not for what government and the Supreme Court and Congress and the president who's going to sit here is going to do to protect you, but you are going to protect yourself. And I am not passing the baton to my successor, as he would do if it were Mitt Romney or someone else. I'm passing it to you. And the last line was where he said, "It is now your turn to stand guard," which is so striking because it really, for me, kind of meets the moment that we're in, which is that you're looking at a person who is going to be an embracer of the oligarchs, who Alex just mentioned, the main leaders of these tech companies, who are probably going to have, we'll see, unfettered access to the Oval Office. You have a Supreme Court they're controlling. They are not protecting you, American public, from these threats we're facing. You have to protect yourselves, all of us, and also the institutions he started the speech talking about.
Yeah, this wasn't I know everyone feels scared and panicked right now, but you're going to be okay, kiddo.
Right.
No.
No.
Yeah, that was not the speech.
Yeah,
Alex.
it also, in a weird way, wasn't about Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump is the sort of harbinger of a
Good
doom
point.
that is much broader, right? He's talking about institutional atrophy. He's talking about the corruption of American democracy, the crumbling of a free press. I mean, as much as people would like to blame all of that on Donald Trump and MAGAism, the roots of that extend far beyond that, which I think is why you see a pivot towards not just like Trump, who, by the way, the American people elected, but a refocusing on sort of civic duty in this hour, right? Like, you guys elected him, understand that there's a lot of swirl here, and it's going to be up to you to stand watch.
Rachel, this has been a theme, I think, of your coverage throughout this period of the kind of the duty falling to the citizen. It's something that Barack Obama has talked about as well. And that last line that Jen highlights, that like, I pass the baton of standing guard to you, the citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, you know, the other thing he said right at the close of the speech, he said, I love the United States of America, and you do too. Try to evoke in all of us a sense of a thing that we love, that we need to be protected. We need to be reminded that we love it, and so we need to act to protect it. And part of that means, I mean, when you're talking about an oligarchy that's based in tech, that's based in information, that's based in the currency of truth and attention, there really is a call to the individual to try to hold on to our civic responsibility and hold on to reality as a basis of keeping citizenship alive, of making sure that we know what's going on in the world. I mean, that's why he said the thing about social media and not doing fact checking. That's why he said the thing about the free press crumbling. I mean, he made a bunch of news here. He talked about wanting 18-year term limits for the Supreme Court. He wants a constitutional amendment so that there isn't bizarre presidential immunity for anything a president does. He made news at the outset by explaining that this ceasefire between Gaza and Israel was negotiated by his administration. And yes, they kept the Trump folks in the loop because they're going to have to implement it. But it was Biden's administration that negotiated it. I mean, all of that was news and good to get. But this was a love letter to America for a outgoing president who is very worried about what he describes as oligarchy, and he thinks that we as individual citizens are going to have to change the country a lot in order to stop it from this drift that it's on, which he portrayed in very, very ominous terms.